What's going on, YouTube? Hey, welcome back. We're about to get down in the shop, back in our normal environment, doing some of our normal stuff. The wagon is back center stage. We're going to be doing some more work on that. I've had some parts come in, took a little bit of a break to do some work over on that one, and now it's time to make more progress on this guy. So, what we're going to be doing today is playing with the inner fender kit. This took a little bit to get in because, well, big stuff, ships slow, all that normal stuff that most of us already know about. Anyway, the front end setup that's on here is a Heights Mustang II kit that I got secondhand. So I'm pretty sure it's a Heights Mustang II kit. That's what they said it was. And that's what it looks like. It looks like one of the older ones, but whatever. It's basically the same as most of your basic Mustang II conversions for the Chevy II. It's, you know, the bottom of the barrel of the better stuff. The front end inner fender kit that I went with, I looked at Heights. They've got one. Looked at CPP, they've got one, and I looked at a couple others. They all look identical. Now, the reviews are a little bit different from one brand to the next as far as which one's the right way to go and which one fits up better. But essentially, I went cheap with what I could get. Out of what was available at the time that I ordered, I ended up going through Summit, and they had the Heights kit and the CPP version that I got, both in stock with a price difference of, don't quote me, I'll put it on the screen somewhere, probably, you know, like right on top of this box right here. But I think it was like $150 difference in price, but the kits literally look identical. Everything that I could find about the two kits, about the parts that are included, the gauge of the metal, the pieces that are there, it was nearly identical. So I rolled the dice and I went with the cheaper of the two, which was the CPP kit, because everything I'm doing on this car is being done on a budget, because I want to see how cheaply I can do this. Not necessarily cheap like garbage cheap, but you know, try and keep the budget down on the car, because it's a beater. That's what it is. So I'm going to dig these parts out, and we're going to start fitting them up and find out if the CPP parts do have fit up problems or if they fit up correctly, and you know, where we're going to go from there. Once we get them fit up, we will have to pull them back off again, because as you can see, they are bare metal with a bunch of yucky oil on them. And so we'll pull them back off, we'll give them a good cleanup and shoot them the same black that we put on the firewall and do a final installation. But before we do that, we want to actually make sure they fit in case there's any modifications got to do. So I'm going to get to getting this stuff unpackaged, and once we get there, I'll show you what all we've got, and then we'll start fitting it on the car. Okay, so here's what we got. The inner fenders, which I already took a couple minutes to clean most of the shipping oil off, because they were just coated in it, which is a good thing because that keeps them from rusting, but it makes them really messy to handle. But overall, they actually look pretty good. I mean, pretty healthy gauge metal, good amount of stiffness to them. We do have some shipping damage. You can see there's a bit of a bend in it right there. That's going to be difficult to deal with, but we can straighten that back out. And then on this one, same thing. It looks like it took a whack right here. So the packaging wasn't the greatest. But overall, it is just sheet metal, and that can be straightened. One thing I did notice is that they are drilled what I believe is 63 to 65 here, and 62 only here. So that's nice to see that it's got both options on there. Also included in the box was a couple bags of hardware, which it has these, which I don't know what they're for. And then it's got a mess of these bolts, which are a flange nylock nut with an Allen head bolt. Interesting combination, but it'll work. And it included the important hood hinge brackets. These actually mount off the firewall. They will support the inner fender, and they'll support the hood hinges because the inner fender by itself is insufficient for supporting the hood hinges. That's what was in the box. What was not in the box? No instructions. So with no instructions in the box, we're just gonna wanna wing it. I mean, it is only 4 pieces that have to mount in a couple of pretty obvious places between the firewall and the core support, which I have down here on the ground. I don't think it's going to be too bad to mount up given everything lines up okay. So I'm going to see if I can do it by myself. I may have to get the wife out here to give me a hand, but we'll find out. All right, so my guess, looking at what we have, the hood hinge bracket's got to go on first because I don't know how you would put it on otherwise. And it mounts up here on the firewall to these 2 bolts here. Okay, in putting this on, I did just go snug tight with the 2 bolts in the firewall, so that I have a little bit of movement in this as I fit the fender. Not sure, I think I need to put the core support on before the fender will actually hang in place. Should be this one. Let's see, should go on this side. Maybe it goes on the other side. No, it's got to go on that side. Instructions would have been great. Okay, so it'll go something like that. When you only have one hand, use your mouth to hold it. It works. So these 2 bolts that I'm putting in right now are just to hold this here. When we actually go to put a fender on, these will have to come back out because the fender itself will also have to bolt through these same holes. But for now, this should help keep everything in place, kind of. Okay. Victory, we're done. All right, not really. take core support. Not sure about this. All right, so here's what I'm looking at. Here inside the front of the fender well, these holes on the inner fender are supposed to align with this hole, that one, that one, that one, and that one on the core support. But as you can tell, if we look at it from up here, we're not there. It's not reaching, and at the moment, this tab down here that attaches to the frame is up against the frame. So it looks like we might have to tweak a little bit. And back here at the back, this tab down here is floating. So what does that mean? Well, it means we're in the neighborhood, but not quite there. So I'm going to spend a few minutes and fiddle with this and see if I can figure out if it's an assembly procedure, why that's lined up the way it is. Maybe I'm missing something. You know, lack of instructions probably has something to do with it. Or if it is actually a poor fitment of this new part, which is very possible. As far as I know, from all the reviews that I read and reading on forums about these inner fender kits, whether it's the CPP, whether it's the Heights, or any of the other ones, there's always some sort of fitment issue. They never just go right in perfect, unless it's a whole brand new car. And which, when you're doing anything like this with these old cars, nothing fits perfect. There's always something that'll need a little bit of tweaking. So now I just got to figure out what it is that needs to be tweaked, or what it is that I'm doing in the wrong process or wrong order, and fix it. So I'll let you know what that is when I figure it out. Well, it don't fit right. So I backed up a little bit, and I took the inner fender out and put my core support on to make sure my core support actually fit up all the way onto the frame rails to where it sat what I believe is correct. And it does. I believe it goes into the correct position. So then I backed up again, loosened the core support back forward, and shoved the fender back in. And let me show you why it doesn't fit. And the fix isn't too bad, but I'll show you what the issue is, and tell you how I'm going to fix it. So if we look in right here, you can see that the inner fender is hard up against the firewall, which there's probably not enough light there, but I got a fix for that. So we can see that right up in here, we're hard up against the firewall on the inner fender. And right here, we're hard up against the support that goes down to the subframe rail. Hard up against that, so the fender can't go any back any further right there or right there. And if I come up here on top, we're hard up against the cowl pinch right here as well. So this fender is to the rear as far as it can go. And if I come around to the front, you can see, I'll take my screwdriver out because it was just holding that, but you can see right here that we are not lined up on that hole that holds the core support on, and the core support has to go back another 3/8 of an inch before it's actually seated back on the frame rail, because it should go back, hold on, and seat back like this, where basically, yeah, it's a little tweaked right there. Don't worry about that. It's fine. It's fine. It's for holding screwdrivers, okay? Should go all the way back so that the top bolt can go in right here. There's another bolt that goes in the bottom, and that third bolt that goes right there, which you can see doesn't line up perfect. The core support tab's a little out, but that's whatever. It's this side's seated back where it's supposed to be, and that side over there is not. So the fix is simple. We hit it with a grinder. We go bzz, 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 bzz. Take a little bit of material off here and there. Do it a little bit at a time so we don't take off too much, because putting material back is much more challenging. We'll clean up all three of those spots where it's hard up against the firewall. And I think that right down there, that tab, I think it needs to be bent out just a little bit further. So we'll put that on a 2x4 and give it a few wackies with the mallet, and put a little more bend in that. Maybe I'll wait until after I get the other part of it sorted out. Maybe I can just flex it into place. But yeah, so we're gonna hit that with the grinder, clean up those corners, those three spots where it's hard up, take a little bit of material off, and try again and see if we can't get this to fit in there, which ultimately means we'll probably have to repeat that whole process again on this side, I guess. Or maybe that side's just gonna fit. Who knows? We'll find out. So, I don't know how long it's been. A couple hours. Maybe a couple hours. And had that inner fender off and on and off and off and on and off and on multiple times. And finally got to the point where I'm like, man, it isn't working. The few of the spots that I noted before in the video that needed cleaning up for it to seat, that was probably definitely needed. But I got to the point where I just couldn't get it to line up. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should throw the outer on top and see where that lines up, because the three pieces, the core support, the inner, and the outer all have to work together. So let me show you what I got now. If you hadn't guessed, it still doesn't fit, but the problem's not exactly the same as it was. It's a kind of a new issue. So, one, forgive the fact that my fender, it's a little rough, but it was bolted up. It did all fit, and the core support and inner fenders that came off of here on the factory front end weren't wrinkled up. It's just skin damage, right? But as you can see with the alignment, I was working to get this to go back, the inner fender to go back, so that it would fit down there with the core support. And in hindsight, if you look at where this hole is compared to where this hole is, it needs to come forward. And that's true all the way. Every one of these, the inner fender mount locations are too far back by about an inch from the looks of it, which is also at this point pulling my core support back, because my core support should be a little bit further forward so that the fender will sit down on top of here. And if I had to guess, that's, well, surprise, surprise, that's also about an inch. So, the weird part is down here, we're still not actually seated at the bottom, which means my whole core support is doing this number. Yeah. So this is the point where instructions on how to do this would have been extremely useful, because in hindsight, now looking back on this, what I should have done and what instructions probably would say, and if you spent, more money on the kit, hopefully, say that the Heights kit, which is a good bit more money, will come with instructions that say, hey, check your core support with your outer fender to make sure it's where it's supposed to be before you start fitting the inner. Maybe make a few marks or something so that you know that you're going the right direction. Because clearly I didn't do this in the right order. So take a note. Now, have I put a ton of work into this inner fender? No. I don't think I've put hundreds of dollars of work. I don't consider my labor hours worth more than like $5 with what I do. So that's besides the point. I do think that there is still a chance that this is going to work, but now I've got to go back and kind of take a few steps back, start over, and get the core support where it needs to be, figure that out with the outer fender, get that alignment kind of set, and figure out how to maintain that with the core support. Maybe I can put the fender, the outer, on the other side and just pin it at the body and at the top of the core support, and that'll kind of keep the core support where it needs to be while I fit the inner on the other side. I think that might be the approach I'm going to take to see if I can remedy this, because clearly the top of my core support and my inner fender panel is all too far back now, and which means, I can still come forward with it. And the body line, there's room for the fender to settle down, so that inch that's there as the fender drops down this way, that'll take up some of that and bring the fender back into where it's supposed to be, and hopefully help with the alignment of those bolt holes on top. But lesson to be learned, and a reason for instructions, or at least watching somebody else like my dumbass do it the wrong way, is so that when you go to do it on your car, you have an idea of how to do it the right way the first time and save yourself a bunch of headaches. Anyway, I'm going to basically start over. Check it out. They're installed. Yes. Okay, no, not really. But they're both in there. That's got to count for something. Both fenders are actually pinned right now where they're supposed to go. I've got the bolt in right up here. You can't see it probably because it's behind the mirror. At the top, and I just kind of roughed in the door gap. It's not bad for just one bolt and one set of shims. A little big right here. But anyway, the fender's real close to where it's got to go, right? And, well, the bolts on the top of the inner fender still don't fit right. But the bigger issue is how to fix those. And I'll come back to that in a second. I'll show you we switch sides here. On the passenger side, the inner fender's in. I don't have the hood hinge support bracket in there yet. I just flopped this in there because I wanted to see if it had the same problem. And it does. So the holes with this just flopped in here are definitely closer to where they need to be. But I didn't fight with this side to get it to fit back because of what was going on at the bottom on the driver's side that I was fighting with. And same thing, I just have this fender roughed on, door gaps pretty close to where it needs to be, some shims, but it's just one bolt shimmed at that. I knew what the shims were I took out because I had them tagged and bagged. And so I just put those back in, snug that bolt up, and I know that end of the fender is really close to where it needs to go. And then I put a bolt in up here at the front of the fender to the core support, which should put the core support basically where it needs to be. And here, let me show you the real issue. Probably to nobody's surprise, these are made wrong. They're not bent right. The shape is not quite right. And it goes for both driver and passenger side. So if you look, like I said, my core support lined up with my fender the way it's supposed to be. My fender's lined up with the firewall and the cowl the way it's supposed to be. So essentially, I have a 1-inch gap here, which is equal to how far off my bolt holes are. So if I can close this gap, I should be able to mount that across the top, which is probably going to leave me some issues with the alignment of the hood hinge holes, which are no big deal. The sheet metal's not holding the load. As long as we can get the hinges right, I'm not worried about that yet. But down here at the bottom, I have no gap at all. The bottom is already up against the core support, and my core support is not even all the way in at the bottom, which is what I was fighting before, is why I was trying to get the whole inner fender to shift back, because I was trying to get the bottom of the core support seated, which is how I ended up with this whole side at the top shifted, because the bend here at the front is not right. It should be, it's at an angle different than where it should be. It's like whoop instead of whoop. And then, I flopped the passenger side in, and just to eyeball it, and right out the gate, I can see, the locations where I did the grinding work on the driver's side inner fender to make it so it could scoot back are the same problem on the passenger side. And you can see up here, big old fatty gap, and the holes are misaligned up here, no gap down there, which means either the core support has to lay back, which is not going to work, because this fender is where it's supposed to be, and the core support, actually this one, it goes back just a little bit. I took the bolt out of that side. Hold on, let me put the bolt back in so I can show you where that's at. Okay, now there's a bolt in here lined up with that hole. It's not sitting down all the way because it's riding on the inner fender that doesn't want to sit down where it's supposed to go. But as far as forward alignment, length from our cowl to our core support, that is where it's supposed to be. And I had to kind of wedge it in there. You can see our gap on this side right now is only about 1/2 inch. And ironically, that's how far off the holes are in the top rail, about 1/2 inch. And there is room back in that corner for the bracket, the hood hinge support bracket, to mount and come in and mount behind here without pushing this forward. So we've got the space there, but the problem is down here at the bottom, we're kissed up against the core support, and the core support's not in all the way. So, what am I going to do? I think, let me grab my Sharpie. Sharpie. Got it. I think what we're going to do, how am I going to film this? I will do it, is, I think, oh, sorry guys, I'm going to take from about here and cut it off. Get rid of all of that, which might solve the problem, but I may even have to go up higher. May have to go up to even as high as here, which is only going to give me 2 bolts holding the inner fender up top. But seeing as the inner fender is not structural anymore in this front end design because of that main down bar, A couple of bolts holding it in at the front is probably sufficient because the weight that it's got to hold and stabilize is the outer fender. This is all it's responsible for. So I think that's going to be the plan, and we'll do the same thing over here. Whatever it ends up being, you know, I'm chopping that off, getting rid of it, so that these will fit in place. Oh, so, you know what the plan is. I'm going to do some hackery in there. I have come to the conclusion, though, instructions probably wouldn't have helped this at all because, well, the parts are wrong. Since the parts are wrong, I mean, having instructions might have got me to the conclusion that the parts are wrong a little bit quicker. But I think that had the parts been right, the approach I had originally taken for doing the fit up would have probably worked out just fine. But you get what you get, and this is what we got. CPP. The signs were there. The reviews were wishy-washy. A lot of people basically are more than happy to bash on the CPP products. A little bit of work, and I think these are still going to work out for my application, for what I need, and at a more budget-friendly price at the cost of some labor and some frustration figuring it out. But if you're building something real nice, or you don't want to have the figure it out factor, you might want to spend a little bit more and get one of the nicer kits. I don't know if the Heights specific kit, which is the next cost step up, I believe, from these, I don't know that it'll be any better. It looks identical. The parts look identical. It looks like they could have came out of the same production plant, probably both in China, but who knows? I don't have the Heights kit. I can't say. But if you have a Heights inner fenders, did you have trouble with them? Did they fit right? Did they come with instructions? Let me know down in the comments, because I still have that car over there that I got to do something with on the front end. And I don't know what that's going to be yet, but you never know. It could be a basic Mustang 2 setup that needs this style inner fender. It could be something else. I don't know. But knowing is half the battle. So I'm going to do a little bit of hackery, see if I can't get one of these cut tonight, and before I head in to have dinner, and then we'll probably finish up tomorrow and see if we can't get this mock-up all together and actually have the fenders properly hung and bolted using the stuff that we got. So yeah, I'm gonna get back to working on it and see if do some cutting. Garbage. They're straight garbage. Here's what I cut off the first one. Not a whole lot. I mean, I didn't get carried away, but I did end up taking 2 bolt holes out of it, right? And it helped, but just revealed a whole nother level of problem going on with this. So let me show you what I got now. So after taking that piece that's down there, hey, say hi.
Hi.
After cutting that piece off from right down here, just like I had showed with the pen mark before where I was going to cut it off, took 2 bolt holes out of it, and as you can see, my line there is actually, you know, pretty close to lining up with where the core support should have been. Now it still needs to suck in a little bit, but if you look down here, my core support's not all the way in yet either, because I'm still fighting an alignment problem up higher because that whole angle is off. But I don't want to take all the bolt tabs off because then it won't bolt to the core support at all. And that led me to the next thing. I took the fender off, put this back in, put the fender back on, and now I've got the 2 bolts are in. You know, this one and this one are both going to the inner fender and kind of sucking it into place the way it's supposed to almost be. And then I look at the top alignment now, and I've got this mess. The alignment this way is good, but the alignment this way is garbage. And it's that way there. That one gets closer, that one's closer, and that one's closer, which means that this bend, no, not this bend right here, or this one of these two is bad and at the wrong angle. So now the bolt holes are getting further apart. And my fender is, it's bolted to the core support. It's aligned in line where it's supposed to be. The core support is square on the frame rails where it's supposed to be. And it's the same, this side's still bolted and the body line's still good on that side up at the front. And it's likely going to have the same problem over here because it's just garbage parts. So I'm frustrated. I think what I'm going to end up doing is, first off, I'm going to go inside the house and write an email to Summit, send them a bunch of the pictures that I took of how crappy these fit, and find out if they'll do anything about it, which probably not, and I don't want to wait for it. I'm going to screw around with these enough. I've already cut on it. I've already took a grinder to it. So it's not like I can just return it because I didn't want it. I don't know what's going to come of it, but I'm gonna let Summit know, give them peace of my mind and let them see the photos, because these parts, they're garbage. They are absolute garbage. And if you're not a fabricator, you would never be able to make use of these parts. Not for 2 seconds. Me, I am not a fabricator. Professionally, I like to make stuff, but not a skilled fabricator. I won't claim that title. But I think what the plan's going to be is I am going to try and still make these work, but I'm going to hack at them, and I'll end up cutting these misaligned bolt tabs, cut them off, and weld a new tab on there and drill it to match the fender so that those line up. And because I can't adjust these on the front of the core support, you can't even see what I'm pointing at. The bolts on the front of the core support, I can't adjust those anymore. There's not enough tab length for me to pull it out further. I can't just bend it out because then it'll screw up all the alignment vertically, which the height wise is pretty good. It's pretty close. We can shim and count for that. But so the only option I really have at this point to make use of this is to either extend the tabs, which is probably the easiest way, or the other thing you could possibly do is you could possibly split it all the way down and then put a strip in it and make this part wider so that the tabs come over further. But that I'm really liable to screw up because that's a long weld on sheet metal that also has to be pretty straight, and it's a long straight cut and then 2 long welds to get it back together. I don't have the skills for that. But cutting these tabs off and putting longer ones on, I think I can manage that. So that's probably going to be what the plan is. Unfortunately, I don't have any material on hand to do that with. That's going to have to be a run into town to get some material. And everything's already closed for the night. And I believe my dinner just showed up. I think the wife ordered out. So I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to go blast Summit, and we'll hopefully get back on this tomorrow and see if we can't figure out how to make these stupid things work. What's up, guys? It's a new day, and sometimes getting a little bit of rest really helps with stuff that frustrates you. So what rest didn't do was make these inner fenders fit right. They still don't fit right. But I think, I had a couple of realizations when I came back out here this morning and started looking at it and trying to figure out how I was going to make this work. First things first, I did have one error in how I had it set up, but that doesn't contribute to the fact that they still didn't fit, because that would have just made the problem worse from the get-go. So let me show you where I'm at. So originally, this came within the hardware, it came with these spacers, right? And I had no clue what to do with those. Didn't know where they went, and I have since figured that out. Those spacers go in here behind the bracket that supports both the inner fender and the hood hinges. That's where those spacers go. And you're like, oh yeah, that should make a huge difference in the fender alignment. Well, it does make a big difference, but remember, our problem was that the fender wasn't going back far enough for the core support to mount properly. So if I would have had those spacers in there to begin with, this still would have been a mess. All right, so that was part one. I'm glad I figured that out. That fixes a lot of my hole alignment at the top once I get this set. The next part that I started looking at is, I'll show it on this side because I haven't modified it, is this has got a bend. We look in here, you can see the bend, it goes towards the outside of the fender, and that's what's got the holes that mount to the core support. I can't get those lined up. Doesn't matter what I do. I can't get those lined up, and it's also not at the same angle as the core support. You know, we got a larger gap here, no gap down there. That's just not working. And then also this weirdness going on down here at the bottom where it's on the outside here, but you have to shove it in to even try and get that bottom hole over. So what I did is I took that flange over here on the driver's side and I just cut it clean off all the way up and down the side. Once I did that, this, if I push the bottom over up against the frame rail, now fits in there basically where it needs to go. And these holes up at the top are really close to actually being in line with the fender this way. So the bend that's a problem, the part that was made wrong is this leading edge with the bend going out. And what I think may be the thing is I think that bend needs to go the other way. So this isn't bolted in, and with one hand I can't really show it very well. Let's see, what if I do this? So there we go. So you can see I pulled the bottom over to the frame. I still got to do a little bit of trimming right there so that that'll seat up underneath the lip of the fender. And if we look down where the holes are, right there, you can see all the holes in the core support are to the inside of the engine bay from where the inner fender is going to be. So what that means is that bend was crap. Either that bend was crap or another one's crap. I think the intention was for, I don't know how that bend and the bottom alignment, I don't know if the tab over was too short. I don't know what was wrong with it. It just basically, it was wrong. It doesn't work the way it is. So now that I've got it cut clean off, I'm gonna actually take the inner fender and get it to where it mounts up to the outer fender, all bolted in all the way back, and that leaves me with resolving a connection to the core support. So my plan for that is, because I have, ooh, don't mind the white out here, we're stepping out into the sun. Ooh, there it is. What I have out here is the front end that came off of this car. I also have another one over there, and out behind the shop there's a third one. So I've got factory front ends. What I'm gonna do here, and try and show this to you, is I'm gonna take this guy and I'm gonna cut this all off of here and mount this section with probably about 1 inch of material on it to the core support from both sides, and then see how that lines up with my new inner fenders. And if that's gonna work, I'll weld that, obviously clean it up a little, but I'll weld that to the new inner fenders and hopefully be able to resolve making this all work between my old junk parts and the brand new parts that were supposed to be bolt in ready. The other thing I was looking at, which this one is a terrible example of it because this one's got some rod in it, but the new inner fenders don't have provisions for the factory battery tray. So what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm actually going to cut this whole section out of a core support, or out of one of the factory inner fenders, and scab it onto the new inner fender for the passenger side. And I'll be able to install a factory battery tray on the aftermarket inner fender. I think I'm going to try and do that because, I mean, what the heck? I'm already having to cut them up and modify them and weld them and refit them and reshape them. So why not add provisions for a battery tray, right? That seems easy enough. Like I said, this one's got a little bit of rot going on with it right here. So I'll probably end up cutting this section out of one of the other front end pieces that I have that's in better overall shape. But that's going to be the plan. I'm going to start cutting some of this stuff apart and see where I end up. Check it out. I'm still here. I'm still doing this. And to you, that was probably just, you know, a quick flicker of the video that I did earlier today, like 4 or 5 hours ago. It's now late in the afternoon. And as you can see, that fender's still not in the car. But progress has ensued. So I concluded that as these came is garbage. Useless. There's no way to actually make that panel fit right the way it came. Already talked about that. And then I went through a couple of different ideas. I worked on the back a little bit on, again, all this work was done for the driver's side over here. But I worked on the back thinking that that's where the issue was. Turns out not so much. The back's actually not as bad as I thought it was originally because I had the front positioned wrong. Learned that. And sorry, I got the sniffles. The air temperature's come down quite a bit and it's making my nose water. But the front is where the issue's at. And the bend on the front is just garbage. So I removed it completely. And after removing it, I fit this up, and what do you know? I was able to get everything else to line up after doing a bunch of reshaping up in this region where it meets the core support, and reshaving of the front multiple different times. In short, I've had this panel and this fender assembly on and off the car, I don't know, 30 times today, if not more. And part of that is because I am very much an amateur at custom fabrication stuff like this and don't have the budget to just hack it, throw it away, and start over. And I also don't have a press brake, so I can't do new bends or anything that are clean. So I was taking off very little material at a time until I got it to where I needed it to be, because I'd rather go slow and not waste, you know, totally screw myself. But I got it to where I needed it to fit. And now this piece that is now tack welded on, this is straight off of another front end. Now it's this right here. Actually, it would be for the driver's side, it's this one. Obviously not off this front end. I have another one out back that was already out behind the shop. I'm pointing and you can't even see where I'm pointing. But back there on the other side of that wall on the outside, I have another front end that's already been scabbed, had some pieces cut out of it. So, but it had these two, this piece right here and this piece right here, which I'm going to use for the passenger side. And I took a much bigger chunk because I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't put the factory battery tray section into this panel over here. Because I think if I do it right, I don't even know if you can see it, but if I do it right, I think I can get the factory battery tray back in here. And since I'm already doing a bunch of BS work on this, why not take it to the next level? So where this is at right now should bolt up and things should line up. So I'm going to go ahead and set the camera up and put this side together on camera. And hopefully now that I've tacked that all in, it goes together right and I'm not totally screwed and having to cut all that back apart. So we'll see. One thing that I have gotten really good at is throwing this assembly together in a pretty timely fashion, seeing as it's been on and off so many times. So, here we go. You hang it right there. So each time I've done this, I've made a point to get the door gap at the fender at least eyeball close to where it needs to be, because well, it's kind of key to getting the core support in the right place when you're setting this up. So if you do attempt to, you know, go through this fiasco that I've gone through, you want to make sure that you keep an eye on your door gap. And I'll show you once I get this bolted up. I'll show you where I've got it. You can see that it's, you know, it's in the right ballpark. So there's that. I left the bolts over here. It is, this would be easier as a two-person job, just so you know. But wifey's in getting dinner ready, so I'm trying to get wrapped up because it is Sunday evening. And, you know, like all of the rest of us, want to be superstars, but really we just have daytime jobs that take priority. So I'm just trying to... Make sure the core support's actually all the way in. Not only does it go all the way in, but we'll put bolts in it to make sure that it's where it's supposed to be. Okay. Clamp. Clamp fell. I'm gonna climb in here. Sorry. Yep. Don't you be that. Anyway, so the bottom of these inner fenders just get attached to the frame rail. I think most people use just a sheet metal screw. Probably what I'll end up using, but we'll see. For now, I'm using a clamp. There we go. Oh, I made it. I'm good. And then we take hot damn. Pull over. Bolt. There we go. Now, I didn't, as you just saw, I didn't go through and I didn't put nuts on the back of all these because this still has to come back apart, and I actually have a gripe with that. The nuts that came with this kit, which originally I thought were going to be a great idea, are a flanged nylock. Well, the flange on the nylock doesn't actually fit on the backside of this panel because the holes are too close to this surface for that flange. So they're useless. At least they're useless for this. You throw them in the miscellaneous bolt bin and replace it with a nut that does fit. That was something else I discovered after I actually got it lined up and went to bolt it in. But it's in there. It's actually in there, and it lines up good. So let me show you, give you a closer look at what we got. So here's what we got. Like I said, I put a clamp down there that's holding the bottom of this against the frame rail, so that gets our alignment this direction. And by having that in there, it's also keeping the front section up where it's supposed to be. Here's all my tack weld spots that are tacked to this strip right here that is only bolted at the top and at the bottom currently, but the holes are there for bolting it in the other two spots. And after this is that area that I had to massage a lot to get to fit, and I think my fitment actually came out pretty dang good. Pretty good fitment there. Pretty happy with that. The gap here, some of that's the fender, some of that's because it's not tightened down, some of it'll go away as this gets clamped and tightened in place. And I'm not gonna go to that extent yet because I don't have the mud bucket in, and the mud bucket actually goes between the fender and the core support. It fits right there, so that's why this isn't tightened down to either, so that actually affects that clamping a little bit. So that's just pinned in place so it doesn't go anywhere. But as you can see, these bolt holes now line up. So I can actually use the holes that are in there, and that's all the way back. And then, remember I told you about those spacers. They go back, right back here between the firewall and the hood hinge bracket. And once those are in, you can see that, you can kind of see, but the holes are more or less in the right spot for the hood hinges in all three places. I might have to do a little bit of reaming on that once everything starts tightening up and seeing how it fits. But the inner fender is in the car, and once I get done cleaning that all up there and give it some paint, it won't even really be noticeable that it's a hack job. And that alignment with everything in place, here's what the door gap currently looks like. Now keep in mind the bottom will vary a little bit because the bolt down here on the bottom's not in. So once that's in, I can actually tighten up and even up the lower portion of the door gap. But overall, it's pretty close to where it needs to be. Close enough that I can work with it for all this fitment, and it's not gonna have a drastic impact to where the bolts and everything have to all land and be happy. I haven't, as you may have guessed, I haven't mounted a hood hinge yet. So I don't know if that's gonna work. I don't know if the hood hinge is gonna be in the right place, but before I can do that, I have to get over there and basically repeat everything I did on this side to that side. But I have an idea of where I'm going. I know what I'm doing now. I'm no longer trying to fight with the panel as it came from the supplier to fit in there, because it just doesn't frickin' work. So now that have abandoned making it work the way it came, when I go to do this one, it's going to be a much easier, I don't know if it'll be easier, but it'll be a funner process, because it's going to go straight to the hack, chop, cut, rebuild to make it what I want it, instead of try and use it as is. Which that battery tray, I'm kind of really liking the idea of doing that, and I'm almost certain I can make it work. So we'll just have to see where that plays out. Unfortunately, like I said, it's Sunday evening now, and it took a day and a half to get that one side figured out, and a whole lot of frustration, and then a feeling of victory, because after I abandoned the frustration about making it work the way it was, it became more of a challenge, a rewarding challenge to make it work the way I wanted it to work and make it fit the way it needs to fit. So, I still think that these parts are garbage. I did send an email to Summit. I haven't heard back yet. When I hear back, obviously I'm probably going to have another video about doing the other side and adding the battery tray to it, which I'll try and put a little more detail into that video about the different steps that I'm doing. But this one, it was just very frustrating, and I just wasn't having it as far as trying to film and figure it out at the same time. But I will on that side, especially because of the battery tray. I don't think I've ever seen anyone take get a factory battery tray mounted up by cutting the panel up and splicing the original mount for the battery tray into an aftermarket inner fender. So I'll definitely have that a little more detail on that in the next video. But these parts, the Classic Performance or the CPP, same thing. Unless you are ready to take on doing something like I've done here, don't buy them. Don't do it. They are garbage as far as fitting out of the box. Terrible. The hardware is subpar, just not great. And it doesn't work with their own product. It just doesn't mount up right. I'm telling you, if someone from Classic Performance watches this video, go out, pull one of these kits off your shelf, and go find an average everyday Chevy II, not some pristine show car that's been restored and already done, and who knows, maybe someone reworked a firewall back to brand new, perfect specifications, better than factory. No, go find an average day, everyday Chevy II car and put the front end on it and try and put these fenders in. Just try it. Just try it. I know you're not going to, because that's time and money and blah, 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 blah. But your fenders suck. CPP, your fenders suck. They don't fit. Garbage. $220 worth of garbage. Anyway, I'm moving on. I'm done ranting. I'm done working on this for today. I'm really happy with the result that I came up with. Obviously it's not finished bolted yet, but that's okay. It's where it needs to be, and the fender's where it needs to be. The core support's where it needs to be, which means tightening up all the bolts is not going to screw me on that. The only thing in question is that hood hinge section right there. And until I get to where I'm doing hood hinges, I won't know what needs to happen with that, but that's okay. So the next time you see this, I'll be working on this side. We're going to get that battery tray in, and if we make good time, we might even move on to doing hood hinges and see about getting the hood on and find out if that all fits. Once that's all done, then I get to blow it all back apart, clean these inner fenders back up, and get some paint on them, and then we can start working on actually continuing to put the car back together so that we can get closer to having a running, driving car. The core sport's going to also need a cleanup. You can see that the lower section of it needs some paint because it looks like trash. So thank you for watching. I'm more than happy to hear any input that anybody has on these inner fender setups or other companies that make inner fender setups that are known to be better. I know on this car I went cheap, but I went cheap because this whole car I'm trying to do low buck, because it's kind of a rough wagon. So I don't want to put big dollars into it, because big dollar parts aren't going to increase the value of it more than what I'm doing. And especially for things like the inner fenders, which someone could easily yank these back out and put a different one back in the future if they wanted to, if I ever get rid of the car. So whatever the case, I would love to know more, or if you have other ideas, or if you fixed this problem differently and have information on that, feel free to let me know about it. I'd love to see it. Pictures. If you want to email them to me, I'll put an email address down in the description below. If you've got pictures or videos of your setup that's had to unscrew this, or even better, if you are running the CPP Classic Performance inner fender kit, this kit, and it didn't require modification to install, I would really, really love to see that. I would love to see how it went in. And what the parts actually look like, because I don't believe that even exists, at least not right now. So prove me wrong if you can. Anyway, that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next one.